And the ironic thing is that this loss of innocence didn't necessarily come around from the things that I learned within the secular world, in the politics present in DC. It came about because of certain circumstances going on in one particular denomination. You see, within the office where I was working that summer, I learned certain lessons. Lessons about how you need to build consensus, package your message, and sometimes you may need to compromise a little bit for the sake of moving your agenda forward. You need to make the difficult choice of, well, this might not be where I want us to be, but it moves us one step closer to that end goal of where we should head. So when I say that I'm not harping on statesmanship. It's a real art and it's a real gift. It's a real good thing that we have good Christian statesmen in office. But what I am saying is that if you're a person that has strong ideals, and it's very hard for you to compromise on those ideals, even though you see the larger goal ahead, and you're moving towards that, it can be a very tough thing. That summer was a summer where the major controversy broke within the Episcopal Church. And you see, I was privy to this because I was attending a local church, and the person I was living with was actually a member of a leadership group at the Falls Church, Episcopal Church in Virginia. And this is the summer that Gene Robinson was ordained, a gay bishop, the first gay bishop in the Episcopal Church. And as I learned about this, and I saw this, and I read the literature about how this all came about, I just felt incredible disgust. Here I read this literature, and what I saw was the same sort of worldly patterns at work in the body. Just as the political offices where I was working taught us that you need to build consensus and go in this direction and that direction, I saw the same sort of things at work here. Gone was my ideal that the church is a place where we first and foremost look towards God and look towards His words and listen to His Spirit. But instead what I saw was a denomination that had decided to bend its knee to the cultural influence and follow a worldly pattern. Fast forward a few more years, and what happened within the church that I was connected with back then was that they had decided that they could no longer stay within the Episcopal communion because of how it had, in their view, drifted away from the gospel and the Word of God in its teachings. The difficult thing about that was that not everyone within their church agreed with them. So thus ensued a very bitter legal battle over the church property and who gets to control this property. And to my knowledge, this legal battle, this lawsuit is still in the courts. Just like it was for me that summer, what I experienced was sort of a disillusionment with the church because of this conformity, really, to worldly patterns. This conformity to the cultural and political influences, this conformity to resolving these issues through the law courts. And I say that not to harp on the Episcopalians. Certainly this sort of issue is present in many denominations, and there's many struggling with this particular issue that has and continues to divide them. And I'm not saying this to say that they were necessarily wrong to fight for their church property. But what I am saying when I bring this example up is that such choices come with grave consequences and should not be taken on lightly. Much like what's happening in the Corinthians church, when we decide to air our disagreement so publicly, it says certain negative things to the world around us. This leads me to ask the question, is the gospel furthered by us tenaciously demanding our rights? Does it make the church look like a place of all healing, grace, and love when believers end up in bitter lawsuits before the world? Is that the sort of community Jesus has called us to be? Obviously, to all that, Paul is saying an emphatic no in this passage. In verse 7, he asks, why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be cheated? And those two questions beg a further question. Rather than what? What is worse in Paul's mind than being cheated and not getting your due? I would submit to you the answer, rather than to make Christ out to be a liar. How does suing fellow Christians in public court do just that? Let me explain. The Gospel tells us that we are royalty, sons and daughters of God Most High. And it's important to realize that we are royalty right now because we have accepted Christ's death and resurrection, and that changes our identity from sinner to son of God. We are a new creation. That's right now. Yes, there's further things that are going to happen later on, but right now the reality is I am a son of God, and I am royalty thereby. This is what Paul is getting at when he's talking about us judging angels in the world in the future. He says, starting in verse 2, do you not know that saints will judge the world? And if you are to judge the world, are you not competent to judge trivial cases? Do you not know that we will judge angels? How much more the things of this life? Therefore, if you have disputes about such matters, appoint as judges even men of little account in the church. I say this to shame you. Is it not possible that there is no one among you wise enough to judge a dispute between believers? So the point he's making here is that even the lowliest among them, even the lowliest among Christians, is royalty and therefore is qualified and fit to be a judge over these issues. All wisdom is given to us as believers. Yet the Corinthian church lives as if this is not the case. Their lawsuits say to the world that nothing has changed. We aren't royalty. We don't have wisdom. We don't have the ability to settle even our own disputes, let alone be a light to you all. And if that isn't bad enough, such contentions undermine the gospel in other ways. The word hypocrisy comes to mind. Just think if you were a pagan Greek in this city at this time. What would you think of this upstart religious group in your community? They claim to have all wisdom because they're God's people, and yet they don't have enough wisdom to settle their own disputes. They claim to be a community built on moral purity, and yet, as we can see in chapter 5, it's common knowledge that they are proud to have a man who's sleeping with his father's wife among their number. They claim to be a community built on forgiveness, and yet, once again, their forgiveness is not strong enough to keep them out of the courts. So you might be thinking, where are the transformed people? Where are the people that this religion claims have made into new creations? They don't seem all that different than everyone else.